In a different video, I talked about my journey as a professional. So from when I left college all the way until where I'm at right now in my pro career. But I thought it'd be important for me to talk about my college journey and some of the stories there that happened. I know you're probably around that age, either about to go to college or maybe even in college right now. And I think just hearing my experience, I think could be helpful for you, and just hearing some of the stories that I went through and some of the lessons that I learned. So the beginning of the story actually doesn't start with being recruited or my freshman year or anything like that. It starts all the way back when I'm 8 years old. I know you're thinking, what does being 8 have to do with your college journey? But we'll get to it. So 8 years old, I'm playing on my very first travel team, challenge team, no longer playing for the YMCA, finally playing for the local SCSA. Club no longer exists. It's now CSA, but that's how far back I go. So 8 years old, playing on this new team for me, and we're playing games every weekend. I've got a buddy on my team. His name is Jack. And his dad went to Wake Forest for college. And so after one of our games, one of our team games, one weekend, one Saturday, Jack and his dad tell me and my dad, hey, you guys got to come up with us to a Wake Forest soccer game tonight. And I don't know about my dad, but I didn't know what Wake Forest was. They had hyped it up a lot. We go with them, we drive up. It's an hour and a half north of Charlotte. We drive up, and I've got no idea what to expect. I don't know what a Wake Forest is or any of that. The whole car ride, they're hyping it up, and they're also talking about how we were planning on staying in a hotel that night. They were talking about how it had an ice cream room, which I didn't even know what that meant, but that was part of it. So we're driving it up, they're hyping up the game, they're hyping up the hotel, and I remember walking into that game and just being amazed. We showed up right around game time, and the amount of fans that I saw, I had never been to a big soccer game before, not a pro game, nothing like that. I was just amazed. I saw all these fans, a couple thousand people. I see the field, immaculate, just the floodlights, everything, and I was just like, this is so cool. And then the game starts and they start playing. They were really good. So this was back in 2007, and they ended up winning the game. It was some of the best soccer I had ever watched. Like I said, I'd never really been to a pro game or anything like that. Man, I was hooked. Like they brought us up just for this one game, and man, I was hooked. We go to the hotel too, and apparently they were right. There wasn't a room. It was called the ice cream room, and there was just like a freezer with all these different ice cream bars. And so I was doubly hooked. We ended up, for the rest of that fall, me and my dad, I think we went up with Jack and his dad a couple more times, but we just went up, me and my dad, for like every regular season game and just had so much fun. Like I said, the team was really good that year. That was back in 2007. They ended up making it to the national championship that year. And I remember it was in North Carolina, but my dad was away for business, so we didn't get to go. But I remember watching it in my TV room in my house just by myself. They were down 1-0. I remember they were playing Ohio State in the final. I remember they scored another to make it 1-1, and then they scored another, and they ended up making it 2-1. And so they ended up winning the whole national championship. It's the only one the program has ever won in history. And I remember being in my TV room, and I'm like on the phone with my dad as the game is going on. I'm freaking out. I'm jumping around. I'm like, Dad, they scored. And like I said, I was a huge fan. At one of the games, my dad got me a number 9 Marcus Tracy jersey, who he was like their best player, the striker. He ended up winning the Herman Trophy that year, which is like the Heisman Trophy for soccer, if you don't know. But I literally wore that jersey around everywhere all the time. I ended up going to some like summer camps and stuff. So man, I was just hooked. So we followed that year, and like I said, we had so much fun. I was so hooked. I was in love with Wake Forest soccer. And we kind of went to a couple more games the next year, but then as I got older, the passion for it just kind of faded away. An hour and a half is kind of far to go for soccer games, and so we just kind of stopped going as much. When I became a sophomore in high school, I ended up playing in this Academy Select game where they picked some of the best high school players in the country in the Academy system and had them play in one game down at a showcase in Florida. I played in that game and I did pretty well. This is when I first started having a bit of college interest. I started going on some visits to some colleges. I even, from that game, got invited to train with the U17 national team in Bradenton, Florida. That's when they had a residency program at IMG Academy. So I went there actually twice for a week at a time. So I went for a week in the spring of my sophomore year of high school, trained with them, came back home, played with my academy team. I got invited again, went and trained for a week. And like I said, this was some time I started having interest. I went on some visits to some colleges. Like I said, when I went on these visits, it was cool and I liked the campuses and liked the programs, but there was nothing that really like stood out to me that I felt really good about. And I remember after one of my academy games, that end of my sophomore year, my academy head coach texted me and said, "Hey, the head coach at Wake Forest wants you to give him a call." I was like, "Oh my gosh, that's cool." I was like, I haven't thought about Wake in years. He sends me his number and I give him a call. And I remember talking on the phone with him, and I remember getting off the phone and I was like, that was a really good conversation. Like, that was really cool. They ended up bringing me on a visit at the beginning of my junior year, so just a little bit after that. And man, I remember pulling onto campus in the car, and I hadn't been on campus since I was like 8 years old. I remember just walking onto campus, driving in, seeing all the buildings, seeing the soccer field, getting out of the car, just seeing all the beautiful trees. All the feelings that I had as a little 8-year-old kid just immediately came rushing back. And I remember I went to one of the first games of the season that fall, and like I said, being in the stands, I felt all those feelings again, walking around campus, and man, it was amazing. It was a feeling I didn't have going on any other visits. And I remember leaving that day, talking with my dad and saying, I think this is where I really want to be. And fortunately enough, a couple weeks later, they ended up giving me an offer and I ended up taking it. And so the beginning of my junior year, it was around October of my junior year, I was committed to play at Wake. And man, it was just amazing to see that kind of come full circle just as a kid. So man, super excited. My junior year, I'm committed, and now just the rest of my high school career was dedicated to working as hard as I could to be ready to win a spot when I got there. And so I knew that my senior year, the guy who was playing the majority of the games that fall of my senior year, he was only a year older than me. So he was a freshman at the time, playing a lot of games. He was going to be a sophomore when I was a freshman. So I knew it would be a good idea for me to graduate high school early so I could get into Wake as early as possible and to fight to get that starting spot for the next fall. I knew that it'd be really tough if I came in just in the fall of my freshman year, because the season just starts so fast that I knew if I came in the spring, it would give me a better opportunity. I also was just kind of done with high school and playing academy soccer and just was ready for a new challenge. So I ended up deciding to graduate halfway through my senior year of high school. So graduated in December and started playing at Wake in January of 2017. And this is where my actual time in college began. So got to Wake in January 2017. I'm hyper focused on starting that fall. I put a lot of weight on it, on myself, knowing that I was capable of it, but just wanted to make sure that I could do everything that I could to make sure that I was the starter come August of 2017. So I worked really, really hard. I trained a lot. I was in the gym a lot, doing all these things. Looking back now, I feel like it might have been to a fault because I spent a lot of time by myself. I've talked about this in some other videos, but just all I literally did was just train, go to class, eat, go to the gym by myself, go to the field by myself, and then just sit in my room and just chill. I wouldn't go to any parties. I wouldn't do any of that, and I don't recommend that really, but I think I could have spent more time with my teammates and just getting to know them more, but I was just so focused on I gotta start in the fall. So no, just being by myself and doing all that. Truth be told, it was a pretty difficult spring for me. I had never really lived on my own. There were a lot of things of just learning how to do laundry and lots of little things that I just had to learn just now being on my own. But yeah, like I said, it was a pretty tough spring for me, just acclimating to college life and academics and balancing that and soccer and just even emotionally trying to keep my head in the right place, or kind of challenges I'd never faced before. But I improved a lot. I played in a couple games. I remember the first start I had was against Duke and we won 2-1, and I had a really good game. We ended up going to UNCW. I talked about this on a prior video, and we lost 1-0 on a big mistake that I made. Ball just went right through my hands and into the goal. That was really difficult to deal with, just knowing that we lost the game just because of a pretty bad mistake that I made. Our last game was against UVA, and I remember we won 5-0. Great way to end the spring, but I didn't even play in that game. Usually everyone plays in your last spring game, but I didn't play. because my coach had told me later that I trained so bad that week. My head was in such a bad place and I trained horrible that week. And he was just like, yeah, I couldn't have played you in that game. So lots of learning that spring, but like I said, it was a pretty tough spring overall. So that summer, I decided to play for the Charlotte Eagles in USL2 because I thought it'd be a good opportunity to get games. My family still lived in Charlotte, so I just lived there, train, play games, and then hopefully build some confidence going into the fall of 2017. So I started training with the Eagles, and I ended up not being, one of the starting keepers. There were two older keepers. One was James Pyle, who was the starting goalie at UNC at the time, one of the best goalkeepers in the ACC at the time. And then it was another older goalkeeper. So that was another kind of tough time, just training a ton. But truth be told, I think I really needed that. The Eagles was a good time for me just to be in a different environment than Wake. But I met Jake Berry, who is now the goalkeeper coach at Liberty. He's in one of my other videos running a session with me, and he was our goalkeeper coach. He was a really good mentor for me just as a goalkeeper and as a person. So we spent a lot of time together. He trained me really, really well. I got better as a goalkeeper, but just also giving me some really good perspective on life, and I'm super grateful for that relationship. I worked really hard that summer, just getting better, like I said, and we ended up winning the national championship. I'd played one regular season game and did really well in that game, but it was a fun summer just to ultimately win that national championship as a group. And I think I learned a lot about just not having your identity in soccer. I think that spring at Wake, my identity was so much intertwined with how I did on the field. And obviously, if you do that, there's so many highs and lows in soccer and college soccer, pro soccer, that if you intertwine your identity too much into that, you're just going to be riding a roller coaster of emotions. And I think the Eagles, it's a Christian team, and I'm a Christian, and I think it helped me put a lot more of my identity in God and in Jesus. And so that was a really good experience for me, really good summer. So I get back that fall of 2017, and I'm super focused on starting. I put in a lot of work that summer and that spring, so I feel good about myself and think that I can win that job. And so we go through preseason and did well in preseason and in some preseason games, made some good saves. But ultimately, I'm not starting first game, and then the second game, and the third game. Truth be told, again, I was pretty down. I had always been the starter in academy and the man, and this was like the first real season. Like the spring wasn't really a real season. Summer, USL2 didn't really feel too real because it kind of felt like a separate team, but Wake was like my main team, and not being the starter for them really hurt, especially that being my first season there. I was pretty down. Yeah, it was pretty difficult, but a couple games into the season, maybe 7 games into the season, I ended up starting my very first game against Clemson. I talk about this in another video. You can go check that one out. But basically, this guy who was starting accidentally slept in the day before the game and missed the morning practice. And so I ended up getting the start. We ended up winning 3-2 in overtime. I made a big save off my face. Someone volleyed it, saved it off my face. We jump up on the wall behind the goal after winning an overtime goal. Man, it was so cool. And it was so awesome just to see all the work that I'd put in all year long pay off in just one game, and to play in a big game against Clemson was super cool. But after that, I went back to being on the bench, and I think I wasn't happy that I was on the bench, but I think I'd learned so much that year just about myself and about the power of identity and not being too intertwined with the results on the field that, like I said, I wasn't happy, but I found ways to just keep moving forward and just enjoy the moment, enjoy the people that I was around. So I made some friends and was just enjoying the success of the team and just making the most of every day. And so while I only played one game that fall, I feel like I just learned and grew so much as a person and just had so many great memories that, looking back, I think it was a good first fall for me. So we go into the spring. I play a couple games in the spring. That next summer, 2018 summer, I played for the Eagles again. And truth be told, I played a good bit of games, but it wasn't quite the same summer that it was the year before with the Eagles. The team wasn't as competitive. We lost a lot of games. It was good action and good reps for me, but it was kind of demoralizing, just loss after loss after loss. And it was a tough summer, and it kind of had an idea planted in my head that I wanted to figure out something for the next summer to go somewhere and play somewhere different. So that 2018 fall comes around. Like I said, I played some games that summer, so I'm thinking, hey, I think there might be a chance that I could start this fall. And so again, I worked hard that summer, got into the season that fall, and it's still the same guy starting over me, the one who was just a year above me. He was now a junior and I was a sophomore, and something was a bit different that fall. I wasn't playing and I was the backup, but I think I was playing from a place of fear, and I was really concerned. Looking back, I feel like I was so concerned of like knowing whether I was the backup, like the number 2, or if I was the number 3, because the other keeper who wasn't playing, he was my class, my age, and he was starting to do well in training. And I remember just preseason till about the middle of the season, I was just, like I said, playing out a place of fear, just so afraid to make mistakes, so afraid of what my coaches were thinking and all this. And I feel like it was really affecting me on the field and in training. And I remember thinking like I hadn't played from this kind of mind space before. And so it was coming to be our last regular season game, and it was against UVA, and it was away at UVA. And if we won, we ended up winning the ACC regular season. And so 2 days before that game, the guy who was starting ended up getting a groin injury. He knew for sure he wasn't going to be able to play that game. So it was between me and the other keeper in my class to see who was going to play that game. Again, a very important game that neither of us had played a game all season, and one of us was about to start. So I remember 2 days before, we both trained decently well. It was still kind of up in the air. And then the day before the game training, the other guy had a really good session, and I just didn't. I think we both knew, the coaches hadn't said anything, but we both knew going into that game that he was going to be playing. And man, that was a really difficult moment for me. So we go to UVA, he starts, he has a really good game. We end up winning, and we're the ACC regular season champions for that year. Obviously, I was happy for the team. I was happy for the success of the program and all that. But for me, it was a really difficult moment to know that there was an opportunity to play and I didn't make the most of it, and I wasn't ready, and I wasn't the one to do it and help the team win. And for me, that game was almost like a rock bottom moment. It was almost like drawing a line in the sand. I had vowed to myself that from now on, I was not going to play in a place of fear or worry or thinking about what my coaches were thinking. And I was just going to play for me and play for my family and do everything that I could on a daily basis to prepare, but just be completely detached from the outcome or what was going to happen if I started, if I play, or if I play well. All these things, I just didn't care. I feel like I almost needed that game to happen and that situation to happen for me just to hit this low point and then come with a new perspective. So after that game, we had the ACC tournament and then the NCAA tournament left in the season. And I remember that first session back from that UVA game, I was a totally different player. I had an amazing session. I had prepared really well, but just like there was no fear. It was all just complete presence in the moment and just execution. And I remember that trend just followed for the rest of that season, for the couple weeks that we had left. And I remember knowing that in the tournament games, you could only roster a certain amount of players, and usually they wouldn't roster more than a backup keeper, but I was getting rostered, which was kind of strange. I remember in my end of the season meeting with the coaches, so we ended up losing, I think, semifinal ACC tournament and then round of 16 in the NCAA tournament. And I remember in my end of the year meeting with the coaches, they had told me specifically that, hey, we usually don't roster more than a backup keeper for those games, but you were training so well. You were the best goalkeeper out of the starter and the backup for the rest of the season. And they were like, we had to put you on the bench just in case something happened to the starter, but just even for the morale of the team, they were like, you were doing so well, we couldn't put you in the stands. So that was a really good feeling for me. So I took that momentum and took that into just winter break, training at home, and man, come the spring of 2019, I was a new man, a new goalkeeper with a fresh mind. And this was also around the time I had found a mental performance coach. His name is Nii Sobo, Niyyisobo. I started working with him online and he completely changed the game for me. So shout out Nii, amazing dude. You should go check him out. He's got his own podcast, Sports Motivation Podcast. But I worked with him pretty much all of that 2019 year and started right at the beginning of 2019, and man, he completely changed the game for me. So took that momentum from the fall of 2018, worked hard winter break, and went into that spring of 2019. Like I said, I was a brand new guy. And so I had some opportunities to play in some spring games and did really well. The starting goalie, the guy who was older than me, ended up getting a concussion that spring. So I pretty much played every spring game, did really, really well. We won pretty much every single game, and I was riding high. Like I had said about that 2018 summer, I was looking for somewhere new to play USL2 this summer just because I wanted a more challenging environment, a team that had a higher chance of winning. At the beginning of that spring, before all those spring games, I had a teammate, Brad Dunwell, who had played for the Michigan Bucks for his USL2 seasons. He had just graduated, but I spoke with him. I told him, hey, could you talk with the Bucks and see if there's any way they'd want me to play for them, or I could play for them this summer? And so he spoke with them, and they came back to him and they were like, this guy isn't your... Well, they saw that I didn't play even in the game that the backup played in 2018. And so they were like, so this guy isn't your starter? He's not even your backup keeper. And they're like, you want him to come play for us. And they're probably one of the most established USL2 clubs of all time, one of the biggest semi-pro teams in the US. Luckily, Brad told them, hey, no, trust me, he's a good goalkeeper. You guys could really use him. So they had played almost all their seasons in Pontiac, Michigan, which is, I think, just like outside Detroit. But this was the first season they were moving up to Flint, Michigan. So they actually ended up reaching out to me and telling me, hey, we want you to play on the team. And obviously, I accepted it. I was super excited to play for a new team, and that was a pretty historically good team. And so did really well that spring, and I was super focused on getting to the Bucks and winning that starting job and doing really well. I got to Michigan at the end of April, beginning of May of 2019, and did really well with the Bucks. I split the regular season time pretty much with the other goalkeeper, Gustavo, one of my good buddies to this day. We worked really hard together that summer, lots of extra training, lots of time in the gym. We ended up making the playoffs that summer. We played our first round in Des Moines, Iowa. The most insane story of all time. I talked about that in a different video. Pretty much, I was playing, and then Gustavo gets subbed on the field for an injured field player. We're down 3-2 in overtime. He scores a goal to tie it up 3-3. We ended up winning in penalties. We ended up going to host the semifinal, the national semifinal in Flint with about 5,000 people there. We ended up winning 1-0, and then we ended up hosting the national championship in front of 7,200 people, and we ended up winning the national championship. Man, winning that national championship in that summer gave me so much confidence going into the fall of 2019. And I knew, man, I was ready. I was ready to win that starting job when I got there back into Wake and just roll with it and see where it went. And so it ended up being that the guy who was starting above me, the older guy, ended up getting a concussion that summer while also playing USL2. And so that job was wide open to take. So won the national championship. If you know anything about USL2, if you go into the playoffs or into the championship or anything, your college season starts right after that. So literally won the national championship. I go home. I'm pretty much right into preseason with my team, and man, I was flying. I was killing it in preseason. Started in the preseason games, did really well. Our first game of the season was against UCF, University of Central Florida, and man, I was ready. And so we ended up winning that game 2-1, had a good game. 2 days later, we played Creighton in the second game of the season at home. We won 1-0. I think we played Dartmouth was like our third game. We won. Then it came time to play ACC. So those were some good first games that we won, but now was time for the big dogs. So I'd only played one game between my freshman and sophomore years, and that was that Clemson game, and that was at home. And our very first game of the season is at Pittsburgh. Pitt was a pretty good program at the time, and this is my first away ACC start. Obviously, I'm a bit nervous, but we go in there and I do my thing. I make some pretty good saves, have a good game.
Certainly throughout the first 61 minutes tonight, he has been in on the action. Almeida, good ball in, and Ordonez with the header attempt, but another big save made by... Almeida again takes a shot, and another good stop.
And I ended up being the ACC Defender of the Week for that week. So far, I've started this season off pretty well, especially for not have played only one game all the other seasons. We continue to go on. We do well. We win games. We lose a couple games as well, but overall, it's a pretty good season. We ended up going to the semifinal of the ACC tournament, and we lost to UVA. And then now it's time for the NCAA tournament. And I remember our very first round game, we drew Maryland at home, and Maryland won the national championship the year before in 2018. So I remember feeling the weight and feeling the pressure of that game. I remember thinking, man, the whole season comes down onto this game. No one cares how we did in those other games. This game is do or die. And that was kind of the first real pressure I felt. We ended up winning, I think 3-0, moved on to the round of 16. And funny enough, the next team that we play in the round of 16 is Michigan, the University of Michigan. And it was funny because a lot of guys who played on Michigan were my teammates at the Bucks for that summer. We played them. I think we ended up winning 3-1. I had a pretty good game.
Michigan to strike back. Good poke there to Brogan. Hallahan through ball. Popovich with a shot and a great save by his teammate.
We go on for the Elite Eight. We draw University of Santa Barbara, and that's at home as well. I ended up making some good saves this game. We ended up winning 1-0, and that meant we were going to the Final Four. So I hadn't been to a Final Four yet in college. My freshman and sophomore years, we had some really good teams, but didn't quite make it. My freshman year, we made it to the Elite Eight. Sophomore year, round of 16. And finally, junior year, as a starter, we make it to the Final Four. I remember, man, just being on top of the world after that game. We have this giant wall, like I talk about, behind one of the goals, and every time we score a game-winning goal or make it to the Final Four, something like that, we'll jump up on that wall. And I remember jumping up on that wall, and it was just a dream come true in that moment. And I remember also being in a post-game interview with my coach and another guy. And my coach said something about how I was the MVP of the NCAA tournament up until that point. And it was so crazy how a year before, I'm just barely making the roster for the NCAA tournament, let alone didn't even play in the one game that there was an opportunity to play in 2018, to now playing all these games and, being the MVP of the NCAA tournament so far. I was just so proud of myself and just so excited. And I think that really goes to show how much your life can change in a year. But we go to the Final Four. It's in Cary, North Carolina, so just a couple hours from Wake. And so we're playing UVA again in that game. And that day, it is just storming all day long, just non-stop rain. The game before us was Stanford versus Georgetown. And so they play on the stadium field, and like I said, it's raining all day. And so we get out there to warm up. The field is trashed just from that game. And it's also just absolutely soaked. I remember trying to pass a ball in the warm-up to a center back, and it went 2 feet and just stopped. And I was like, okay, this is going to be an interesting game. We ended up playing, and we got scored on twice early, which was tough. And then we went in the second half and we scored a penalty, but we ended up losing 2-1. It was disappointing that a whole season kind of ended on that game. Obviously, the conditions were the same for both teams, but it would have been nice to have been able to play a proper game. It was just such an insane game just with the rain and just the way the field was. But it is what it is. I mean, I was super proud of myself that year. I had been the ACC Defender of the Week twice, and I was third team all-conference for the ACC, and we made it to the Final Four. And at the end of that 2019 year, man, I was just so proud of myself of what I was able to accomplish with the Bucks, and then that fall with the team. Going into the spring of 2020, I was super focused on, I've had a good year now, but my goal is to make it professional by the end of this year. I know I've got the ability, and I know that I've got the platform. I'm on a good team that can make it to a Final Four again, hopefully, but that was just where my sole focus was that spring. So we get back January of 2020. I'm working hard, training really well, putting in the work, all January, all February, and then we go on spring break. And when we come back from spring break is when we're going to start playing our spring games. So I'm super excited to show off all my work in my spring games. And right before it's time for us to come back from spring break, you probably know where this is going. The whole world shuts down because of COVID. So all our classes start going online. It's clear we're not going back for the spring. I had to go back and grab all my stuff from my apartment one day, and it was time to figure out what we could do now that it's just COVID, and how can I still get better and be ready for whatever season there might be in the fall. There was a pro keeper, Brandon Miller, and another college goalkeeper, Claudia Dickey, who both live in Charlotte. And so we kind of just started a group and we just trained together as much as possible at the local turf field. That was actually good. We had a really good group and got some really good sessions in. The only other challenge was how I could get my workouts in. All the gyms were closed. And it was funny. One day, right when COVID was starting to hit, right around that spring break time, my mom is out walking our dog. She's in the back of our house. So where we lived, there was houses on both sides, but their backside was the garages, and there was like an alley where the cars would park into the garages. So she's out behind the house in our garage, and you can see all the other garages of the houses on the other side. And she's walking one house, like 2 down on the other side. She sees the garage doors open, and there's a full gym in this garage, like a squat rack, dumbbells, medicine balls, bench, all these things that you can need. And she tells me, she's like, hey, you should go reach out to these people and see if you could use the gym. I'm like, okay. So I go over, knock on this guy's door. I introduce myself, tell him I'm a college athlete and is there any chance I could use your gym? And this guy was like super stoked. He was like, absolutely. He was a big power lifter guy. And it was funny because I started going pretty frequently over there. I would just like roll up his garage door, walk in, just get my workouts in. He would come out every once in a while and talk with me. And it's funny because he was a power lifter, and for them, the reps that they do are super low, like only like 2 reps, but like super heavy. And for performance on the field, that's not really how we lift. And so anytime I was doing something that was like 6 reps or 8 reps or even more, he would always call it cardio. He would just like make fun of me in that instance. So that was a really cool experience. I was super fortunate just to have this guy 2 houses down from me, and that was cool. But trained really hard on the field with that group, and then worked out pretty hard in his garage, and I was super ready for whatever this fall was about to bring. I didn't know what was going to happen. So they ended up canceling like every other conference, but ACC, we still had a season. It was just a modified season, just ACC games. So we get back, and the rules when we get back to Wake are absolutely insane, just from a standpoint of like all our classes are pretty much online. You can't do pretty much anything. It wasn't college at this point. It was just like stay in your dorm room, and we're wearing masks everywhere. We're even wearing masks in training, and it was just a whole thing. But it was weird having to adapt to that lifestyle of just not being around people and not really having that kind of college experience, especially for my senior year, was kind of tough, but was grateful that we could still train and play, and was just looking to make the absolute most of that. So we played our modified season, I think like 10, 11 games, and we did really, really well as a team. So there was no NCAA tournament that fall. They moved it to the spring, but there was an ACC tournament. So had a really good regular season, and now we're ready for the ACC tournament and just making the most of that. So our first game we drew, lo and behold, UVA, who had beat us in the ACC tournament the year before and the NCAA tournament. It was like, okay, we're going to get these guys. And I remember that Tuesday, I'm in our locker room with one of our other captains, and we both get a text from our coach that said, hey, so-and-so guy just tested positive for COVID. Make sure everyone's wearing masks and is separated and all that. And we were like, that's not good. This is not good. So it was Tuesday, games on Saturday. It ended up being Wednesday. The next day, 3 more guys test positive for COVID. And then Thursday, I think we had like 5 more, 6 more, something crazy. So we all get tested at this point, and we get the results back Saturday morning, and we just barely have enough of us to play the game Saturday. So the game is still on, even though half our team has COVID. And a lot of them are some of our starting best players. But we luckily have enough to play the game on Saturday. And so we go out with a team of just like a bunch of freshmen who haven't played yet. We ended up losing 2-0. And yeah, that was a tough way to go out, man, knowing that we had such a good season and knowing that we could have done really well in that ACC tournament. But it is what it is, such is life. But after that point, I started having some interest from some agents and some pro teams, and I had an option to stay for my 5th year. I redshirted that sophomore year that I didn't play, but I knew that it was time for me to move on. I was excited just for a new challenge, a new opportunity. I knew that there was the draft in 2021, of January 2021. And so my name got out there, my name got in the draft, and I was speaking with some agents and teams, like I said, and it ended up being that I got drafted in January of 2021 to Orlando City, and that is where my pro career began. So if you want to kind of pick up from this point and where things have gone from here, you can go watch my journey as a pro video. But looking back, I'm just super grateful for Wake. I was just that 8-year-old kid with a dream sitting in the stands, and then I got to live out that dream on the field. And man, I'm just super grateful to have been able to live out that dream and to be a part of the Wake family. I feel like the Wake Forest soccer program and community is just such a special thing. The games are amazing. The alumni are amazing. The community is amazing. Just how many fans show up and rally behind the team. And just to have been a part of that, man, I feel so grateful, and just super grateful for all the teammates that I had, all the amazing relationships that I built with just friends at Wake, and all the experiences that we had on and off the field, and just all the lessons that I learned. I learned so much just about hard work and being patient and making the most of opportunities. And I feel like I still use those lessons and those stories with myself today just to make the most of my pro career. But I feel like Wake just made me so much of the man and the competitor and the player that I am today. So like I said, it was truly incredible just to see all those dreams come to fruition. And it even goes to show me now that, man, you can be that kid with a dream. You can be that little 8-year-old who is fanboying over all these guys and just being obsessed with the program, and you can be able to create that reality for yourself. But like I said, super grateful for my journey, and just even grateful for all the highs and lows that there were at Wake. I feel like there were so many highs, but so many lows and tough moments. But again, those made me into the man that I am today, and taught me all the lessons that I needed to learn and that I needed to carry with myself and continue to use to this day. So forever grateful for Wake. Like I said, all the players I played with and the coaches, and just excited to see how that program just continues to grow. I'm so happy. I'm in High Point now, so I'm only 30 minutes away from Wake. So I've been able to spend some time there in the spring, and just super stoked. I'm going to go to some games this fall and cheer them on. I'll be in the stands on the other side of it, but forever grateful, forever a Deacon. Yeah, that's it for my college story. So I hope this story lets you know a little bit more about me and the highs and lows of my college journey. And I hope that this might give you some inspiration about what's possible for you. And there might be some lessons in there that you can take and learn. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed the video, and we'll talk soon.